On the morning of June 6, 1944, a German soldier named Heinrich Severloh was positioned in a concrete bunker overlooking Omaha Beach in Normandy. He was a private in the Wehrmacht, assigned to the 352nd Infantry Division, a unit responsible for defending the Atlantic Wall against an expected Allied invasion. Severloh was not a high-ranking officer, nor a famous ace. He was an ordinary soldier placed at an extraordinary point in history. His position was simple but deadly effective. A reinforced bunker, an elevated view of the beach, and an MG-42 machine gun, one of the most feared weapons of the war. The coastline below him was quiet at first, covered in mist and smoke from naval bombardment. German defenses had been hit hard, but many positions, including Severloh's, were still operational. As the first American landing craft appeared through the smoke, Severloh realized the invasion had begun. Thousands of Allied soldiers were moving toward the shore, tightly packed, exposed, and under fire. Orders were clear and had been repeated many times before. Hold the position. Do not retreat. Stop the landing at all costs. When the ramps of the landing craft dropped, the beach turned into chaos. At that moment, Heinrich Severloh opened fire. Severloh fired continuously as American soldiers ran across the open sand. The MG-42 overheated quickly, forcing him to switch barrels again and again. Ammunition belts were fed without pause, while the noise of the gun echoed inside the bunker, mixing with explosions from naval shells and artillery. He did not see individuals, only movement, shapes advancing through smoke and water. Training took over, fear was pushed aside by routine. The beach below became a deadly funnel. American units were pinned down, unable to move forward or retreat. Severloh later recalled that time lost its meaning. Minutes felt like seconds, hours felt the same. He had no clear idea how long he fired, only that the attacks kept coming and his orders did not change. Around him, other German positions were being destroyed one by one. Some bunkers went silent, others were hit directly. Despite this, his position continued to function, and the machine gun kept firing. At that moment, Severloh believed the defenses might actually hold, that the landing could still be stopped. As the morning continued, the intensity of the battle increased. Naval guns adjusted their fire, and shells began to land closer to the German positions. Concrete shook, sand poured from the ceiling, and fragments of steel filled the air. Severloh and the soldiers around him were partially deafened, communicating with gestures rather than words. Despite the chaos, he kept firing whenever targets appeared. Landing craft burned near the shoreline, and wounded soldiers lay exposed on the sand. Medics tried to reach them under constant fire. From the bunker, Severloh could see the beach slowly changing, craters forming, obstacles destroyed, and small groups of American soldiers beginning to find cover near the cliffs. By midday, the situation began to shift. Allied destroyers moved dangerously close to the shore, firing directly at German positions. Several nearby bunkers were knocked out completely. Severloh realized that even if the invasion had been slowed, it had not been stopped. The balance was turning, and the defenders were running out of time. By early afternoon, Heinrich Severloh was physically exhausted. His hands were blistered, his shoulders numb from recoil, and his ears rang constantly. Ammunition supplies were running low, and the MG-42 had already been pushed far beyond normal limits. Still, the firing continued whenever American troops attempted to move forward from the beach. At the same time, the situation behind the German lines was collapsing. Communications were broken, officers were missing or dead, and no clear orders were coming from command. The Atlantic Wall, once presented as an unbreakable defense, was being breached section by section. Smoke covered the cliffs, and the sound of explosions never stopped. Severloh began to understand that the battle was no longer about holding the beach forever. It was about delaying the inevitable. American soldiers were now climbing the bluffs in small groups, using gaps in the defenses that had not existed in the morning. The invasion had survived its most dangerous hours, and the outcome was becoming clear. Later that afternoon, the order finally came to withdraw. What remained of the German defenders was told to abandon their positions and fall back inland. For Severloh, the moment was unreal. After hours of constant combat, silence suddenly felt heavier than the noise. He left the bunker that had protected him since dawn and moved through destroyed trenches and debris. Only then did he fully see the scale of what had happened. The beach below was no longer a killing zone, it was now filled with advancing American troops, vehicles, and supplies. The landing had succeeded. The cost had been enormous on both sides, but the outcome could no longer be reversed. Severloh retreated with other survivors, moving through the countryside under constant threat of capture or air attack. The defensive line was gone. Normandy was no longer a barrier, it was a doorway into occupied Europe. That evening, Severloh and the remaining soldiers regrouped several kilometers inland. They were disorganized, exhausted, and shaken by what they had witnessed. Many units no longer existed as functioning formations. Officers tried to restore order, but the reality was clear: the front line had been broken. The invasion was not a raid or a diversion, it was the beginning of the end. For Severloh, the adrenaline slowly faded, replaced by shock. He had followed orders exactly as he was trained to do, yet the scale of the battle left him deeply unsettled. He did not feel victory or pride. What remained was silence, confusion, and the understanding that nothing would ever be the same again. During the following days, German forces were pushed back continuously. Allied air superiority made movement dangerous, and supplies were scarce. Severloh's unit was forced to retreat again and again, losing men not only in combat, but to exhaustion and surrender. As the days passed, Heinrich Severloh became a witness to the full collapse of the German defensive system in Normandy. Roads were crowded with retreating soldiers, destroyed vehicles, and refugees. Allied aircraft dominated the sky, striking any movement they detected. The sense of control that had existed before June 6 was completely gone. German units were constantly reorganized, merged, or simply dissolved. Orders changed rapidly, often contradicting each other. Severloh moved from one temporary position to another, digging shallow defenses that were abandoned almost as soon as they were prepared. The front was no longer a line, it was a shifting, chaotic space where survival depended on luck as much as discipline. During this time, Severloh began to reflect on the battle at Omaha Beach. The images stayed with him, the endless waves of soldiers, the noise, and the feeling of time disappearing. He understood that what he had experienced was not just another battle, but a moment that would be studied and remembered long after the war ended. By mid-June, Severloh's unit had been reduced to a small fraction of its original strength. Supplies were nearly gone, and morale had collapsed. Many soldiers deserted or surrendered to the advancing Allied forces. The German army in Normandy was no longer capable of mounting an organized defense. Severloh himself was physically and mentally drained. He carried the weight of the battle at Omaha Beach on his shoulders, aware of the devastating casualties on both sides. His role in the defense, though following orders, had left a permanent mark on his memory. During brief lulls, he walked among the wreckage of bunkers, burned vehicles, and scattered equipment. Every piece of destroyed material was a reminder of the intensity of the fight, and of the soldiers and civilians caught in its path. The war had become abstract in strategy, but the destruction he witnessed was painfully concrete. By late June, the remnants of Severloh's unit were retreating toward the Seine, constantly pursued by Allied forces. The once formidable Wehrmacht divisions were now reduced to small, fragmented groups. Discipline was fraying, and survival became the main objective. Severloh reflected on the events of D-Day and the days that followed. He had followed his orders, defended his position to the best of his ability, and survived a battle that had claimed hundreds of lives. Yet the victory he had tried to secure for his side had already vanished, replaced by the harsh reality of defeat. Throughout the retreat, he witnessed both desperation and humanity. Some soldiers surrendered willingly, while others fought to the last man. Civilians, caught in the chaos, fled or tried to hide. Severloh understood that the war had changed forever, not just for soldiers, but for everyone involved. By July 1944, Heinrich Severloh had survived the initial onslaught at Omaha Beach and the subsequent retreat, but the war in Normandy was effectively lost. His unit was disbanded, and he was reassigned to secondary defensive positions far from the coast. Severloh returned home after the war, carrying the memories of the battle and the staggering losses he had witnessed. His actions at Omaha Beach became a subject of historical study, illustrating the experiences of a single German soldier facing the largest amphibious assault in history. Heinrich Severloh's story serves as a window into the human side of warfare. Fear, duty, endurance, and survival amidst chaos. Though he fought for Germany, the events at Omaha Beach highlight the immense scale of D-Day and the cost borne by individual soldiers, showing how one man's experience can illuminate the broader tragedy of war.